This week's podcast is sponsored by Marantz, who've been delivering advanced home audio innovations since 1953. Marantz audio products have been designed to reproduce music as it was meant to be heard, because music matters. Find out more about what makes Marantz so special at marantzmoments.com. Hello and welcome to the AVForums Podcast for Monday the 14th of October. And joining me in this edition, Kaz Harlow.
$80,000 for this car and you ain't got no damn cup holder?
Steve Withers.
My baloney has a first name?
Ed Selley.
Freeze, mother bitches.
And Mark Botwright.
Can somebody talk to me, please?
So, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back, Mark. It's been a few weeks. What have you been up to?
More DIY stuff.
How's the fireplace? Is it gone?
Oh, yeah. Someone lent me one of those tools that, you could down and just kind of smash through bricks. And, I just kind of kept going.
I admire your self-restraint that if you still have a house left after borrowing one of those, that's impressive. Well done.
I did check where the little kind of metal lintels were and everything. Because it does get quite addictive after a while. You just, one more brick.
So it's all gone. So that's good. Shed's been destroyed. The infestation's been sorted.
Yep. I've also dug out the footings for the shed, the new shed to come.
Shed 2.
Shed
Electric
2.
Boogaloo.
Yeah. And I decided quite foolishly that I decided against going with concrete and that I'd just kind of make my own hardcore out of the various things that were around in the garden.
I see.
And I started digging the hole and I overshot and I ended up about 3 foot deep and staring at a mound of earth that I couldn't see over. And so now it's a case of anything I can find is getting smashed and put in the hole. Feed the hole.
You haven't gone full survivalist and decided actually it's time to build a bomb shelter.
I did have a couple of old bits of kind of corrugated steel that I was thinking, well, I could do. I have seen that survivalist program on Netflix. And you do start.
Cover. Yeah,
well, maybe they've got a point.
I've always taken the slightly nihilist view. I don't want to survive the apocalypse. I'm totally unsuited to the business of surviving an apocalypse. So I'm going for the dying in the fireball phase of these things. If I'm honest, I've no desire to be wandering around in a post-apocalyptic landscape. It just looks thoroughly uncouth.
You don't have to wander. Phil's got the car.
Let's be completely clear. This is a bugbear of mine. I mean, one of the things that post-apocalyptic films always get wrong is the actual storage lifespan of gasoline. You can do there's some really exotic chemicals and treatments you can do to it to give the correct stored lifespan of gasoline up to about 4 or 5 years. But the idea that decades after the event, people are still bombing around in cars.
And you think
strong whiskey
to drive a V8 Interceptor around? And do you like the way when he stops, there's a leaking fuel tanker, he dabs it up with a cloth? Yeah,
that's all. There's no impurities there. But equally,
a dabbed cloth will get him down a hill. Maybe.
In another story, a story for another time, that sequence in Mad Max 2 is how I came to break a Vauxhall Omega hire car. But I don't want to necessarily incriminate.
That's not the one you tried slamming into reverse, was it?
Yeah, because it doesn't. They did that in the. They did that in the. That's how the stuntman brings the car to a stop, because it had sod all in the way of brakes. I thought we had an argument over whether it was possible or not, and the long and the short of it is with caveats.
Yeah, you lose your gearbox.
Well, yeah, the engine's probably 20 feet up the road as well.
No, the engine stayed in the car.
Did it? Oh well.
A lot of warning lights came on. And the other thing that obviously you can't see in the car, I need to stress that you do hit your face on the steering wheel really hard, really very hard indeed.
That explains quite a bit, actually, Ed.
Were you into vinyl before this accident?
That's a good question, actually. Yes, I had started at that point, so that's down to other substance abuse. Don't worry about that. But yeah, anyway, Mark, I'm delighted that your house, dragging this tortuously back, I'm delighted that your house is doing very well. I've got all this to look forward to.
Yeah, good stuff. So what's been tying you up this week, Ed?
I have done my son's birthday party yesterday. Has anyone else or any listeners? I went to this place called Kidzania in Westfield. And it's like a tiny prepubescent Westworld with about the same levels of violence, actually. It's actually, I'm being facetious, it's within the remit of there being that many children in one space. I think it's fabulously well done and all the rest of it, and he had a great time. But I was very ready for a drink. last night. Very, very ready. The readiest I've been in some time to have a drink, in fact. So that was good. Today I've started to get this. I'm now within days of the completion point for my house. So I'm just starting to look at all the tat I've accumulated in the shed over the last 18 months. I'm thinking, shit, this has got to all get into a van. So I started to just, work through that, bin stuff, things that have been in the freezer that I don't want to transplant into the freezer in the next house.
Oh, it's amazing in the run up to moving how kind of altruistic you become.
Yeah.
Does anybody want this?
No, absolutely. And incidentally, I'm ready for the point where I do the transfer between of things I do want to take to my next freezer. I mean, I have accrued a lot of microwave curries. That's going to be fascinating to watch as I try and drive the 9 miles or so without any significant defrosting taking place. So if you are intending to use the A509 sometime over the next weekend, just be careful.
Just get a cool box head.
Oh, I've got refrigerated bags, but that's not going to stop me from redoing the French connection.
I'm just imagining you doing an emergency stop and it all joining you.
I need to put my brown flashing light on, frozen curry in transit. And that'll be fine. Otherwise, as I say, it's just ticking over and so on and so forth. But as I say, kid's birthday party yesterday. It's the annual test of willpower for all parents. But Kidzania was bizarre, but very, very good. If you're 6 in particular, it's great. If you're an adult, less so. It didn't appear to have a bar. I mean, the idea of a bar being run by children would have been fantastic, but obviously, I guess there's probably rules against that.
What a lifestyle. Steve, what have you been up to?
Mostly, this week, I have mostly been watching rugby.
Oh, what a shame.
That's about it. I'm going to the cinema. But lots and lots of rugby. Today was a fantastic day.
Are you simply saying that because Scotland was eliminated from the World Cup?
Japan played really well.
You keep forgetting I'm English, so you can slag the Scots off.
He doesn't care. He doesn't like rugby either, so it's
this is true. To be fair, it was a good game.
It was an amazing game, and Japan deserved to win. And
no question. No question.
And I think they'll give South Africa a run for their money next weekend. It's been going great considering there was a typhoon smashing the crap out of Tokyo the day before.
Did you see
the game went ahead?
Did you see the rivers? Did you see the footage of the rivers overflowing in Tokyo and stuff?
I mean, that was the worst typhoon they've had in about 40 years. But I've lived through a couple myself, and they are really scary. Because in England we don't get particularly extreme weather. We've had like one hurricane in my life. We don't get extreme weather. We don't get.
You haven't seen the puddle down my road, Steve. You weren't there.
You caused that yourself. So lots of rugby, which has been really good, and a bit of work and a bit of cinema action. That's about it, really. I never said I lived an interesting life.
No.
But I like it.
We wouldn't want you getting whipped up into a frenzy, Steve.
The most exciting thing for me this week was obviously the release of the new JVC Firmware, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Oh,
we saw your post on Tumblr.
Posts.
No, we saw the post on Tumblr that I stuck in the comments earlier on.
About
Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
No, I don't think it's Tumblr, is he? Because otherwise I'll have a crack at him.
Well, all I'm saying is that that username checks out, Steve. There's no chance that it's not you. So all good.
Okay, good stuff. Kaz, what have you been up to?
Kids all the way.
Okay, we'll move on then.
I can always rely on Kaz to have an even more boring life than I have.
Oh, come on. I got to write a sequel to Rapunzel with my daughter, and we made it thematically similar.
Did you get a haircut?
And she's become a queen, and now she's got a daughter of her own, and her daughter's got her own powers, but she's so worried that her daughter will get kidnapped that what does she do? She won't let her out of the castle. So it's repeating itself. And I tried to
the daughter about how abuse repeats itself.
And I taught my son a little bit more about how to drive, which was nice.
How old is he?
How old is he? Sorry, I missed that. How old is he?
No, he's still 3.
Right. Okay. So I'm assuming you didn't actually let him loose in the car.
No, he just had the wheel.
Wheel attached to anything.
I'm relieved.
I don't think he wants to incriminate himself.
No, that's fair enough.
He was interested. He was desperate to know. He just couldn't reach. He kept saying his legs weren't long enough. So I said I'd be his legs.
Well, that's 3. I'm not surprised.
That being said, children are growing up with, obviously it's a standing joke that there is a whole generation of people now have no idea what a choke is. But I had one of my son's friends in the car, and he's a bright lad, and he said, what's that? And the thing he was pointing at was the handbrake, because none of the cars that his parents have owned have actually had a physical handled handbrake.
Yeah, it's only
Never
Ford.
seen one.
It's only Ford that still have the old-fashioned ones.
You need to be able to do a handbrake turn in a test
Oh,
car.
absolutely,
There's a
absolutely.
handbrake on my car.
Is there?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
Yeah,
you can press park, but there's also a physical handbrake. So there's both.
All right, it's not an electronic button then.
There is a button to park the car, but there is a physical handbrake to you.
Right, that you have to pull up, so you could do handbrake turns in
You
it.
have to pull up. I don't think my car's the kind of car you want to do handbrake turns in.
I would
Going
pay
in
money,
electric.
literally some money to watch you try and do a handbrake turn. But it's to say. So I mean, my son also has an interest in the mechanics of it. But I'm at pains to stress that, mate, most of the things I'm doing in this car are not going to apply to you by the time that you actually.
Yeah,
My
they won't be
parents
driving.
told
So
him-
yeah.
have told him he doesn't need to learn how to drive because he'll just get in and tell the car where it's going.
Go home, car. I'm drunk.
I'm still going to teach him because he's interested. Because my daughter wasn't. So before I had a son, I tried to get her interested in a whole bunch of things, and it still ended up in dolls. I think we had this conversation before.
Yeah.
It just ended up in dolls, and that's just the way it went. No matter how much I
used to watch 1980s action films.
yeah, tried my best. And my son grew up with her dolls, playing dolls with her, and still wants to learn how to drive a car. So
The thing is, there is an element that I mean, obviously you should never stereotype what you think your children are going to be interested in. But fundamentally, for example, when I took my son to the drag racing finals in September, it's fair to say there was a male leaning to the crowd. I don't think it's in any way unsuitable to say that. So there's a nature.
There's a male leaning to our audience.
I would imagine so too. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there are certain aspects where my son is entirely typically a 6-year-old boy. There's other things where I'm impressed that he's deep, branching out. But it's all good. I'm still not letting him drive the bloody car.
yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Greta says no.
The important question is, how does your son feel about Steven Seagal, Kaz?
I'm not quite there yet, but interestingly, my daughter knows him well. So that much I have passed on to her. So,
Have you made her sit through On Deadly Ground?
Not yet, because I don't think.
The one with Michael Caine?
Yeah,
That's
the
the one
best
with-
worst film ever made.
Yep. Where he preaches about the
Environment,
obsolescence
isn't
of
And then blows up an oil well, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, he does that first. And then he preaches about the obsolescence of the combustion engine, which is somewhat ironic in these days because that's like 20 years ago, 25
Yeah,
years.
he was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No, it was Jeff Goldblum in Independence Day. He was well ahead of the curve when it came to recycling and saving the planet. He literally saved it with an
He
apple.
did
He
literally
did say
say
the plan.
Yeah.
But he didn't sit around waiting for the government to do something. He's
the
an
government's
icon
not
for our
going to
time.
do anything.
No, so absolutely, he actually Jeff. Well, I can't even remember what his character is called in
David.
Independence.
It's not called Jeff Goldblum.
No, I'm aware of that.
David, and you've got to be aware that his father's Jewish, in case you didn't pick up on that.
Yes, quite stereotypically Jewish.
Oh,
as well.
it's
Well,
so
no,
over
I
the
know
top.
that
So
John
over the
Hirsch
top.
is Jewish, but he's playing the most stereotypical Jewish man, apart from the gay Jewish boss at his Harvey Fierstein, isn't it? I think
Oh yeah, and he's always got to call somebody.
Yeah, who is playing the most stereotypical gay man in the history of the world. That film is not subtle in its setup.
Yeah, right. I think we've done enough of it. What we've been all up to, and I'm going to talk about what I've been up to in the hardware section. So there's no need for me to repeat myself. So we've got current competitions. Mark's not been around for a while, so why don't you read out the humongous list of competitions, Mark?
This feels like a punishment, to be honest.
You're lucky. This isn't even all of them.
No,
We've got,
this is not all of them. This is just
25
some of them.
competitions running, and they've been capped.
I know,
Why
but
there's
why,
so many competitions suddenly?
and why are they formatted in the running order like I'm supposed to read them like some kind of a beat poet or something?
It's in chronological order. Check the dates.
Yeah, but why is Godzilla on a different
It's not.
line?
It's not actually because I've got the 30 and the 31 round the wrong way.
Oh, you do have a couple out of place.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know.
Okay. Remember, you do read the bits in the brackets as well, Mark.
Do you want me to do it, Mark? Are you suffering here?
No, I'll take one for the team.
Good.
Right. Enthusiasm. Right. yeah, duet. Do it like a choral thing, like London's Burning at school.
Well, we could all take a line each if you want.
Do it. See how fast we can do it. Go.
Right. Go. Okay. Win a copy of Godzilla, King of the Monsters on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. That's closing on 21st of October.
Win a copy of 3 films with Sammo Hung on Blu-ray. That closes 23rd of October.
Win a copy of
Rabid on Blu-ray, 22nd of October.
We didn't work the order out, did we?
No,
Oh, we did. That was it. It's just the 3 of us. Go.
Oh, is it back to me?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. You can edit around this. Win a copy of Vikings Season 5, Volume 2 on Blu-ray. That one closes 22nd of October.
Win a copy of X-Men Dark Phoenix on 4K Ultra HD, closes 29th of October.
Win a copy of Men in Black International on 4K Ultra HD. That's open to the 29th of October.
You can win a copy of Supergirl, the complete 4th season on Blu-ray. That one closes 31st of October.
Win a copy of Flash, complete 5th season on Blu-ray, 31st of October.
Win a copy of Angel Heart on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. That's the 30th of October.
Win a Yamaha Music Cast BAR 400 worth £649, 31st of October.
Win a World of Warship starter pack worth £15. Unlimited number to be won. Enter and you will basically win. And it's worldwide entry. Ends 31st of October.
Win copies of Criterion's October titles on Blu-ray. And that's open to the 12th of November.
Oh, I'll do the blurb. All right. And lots more competitions are open or being added daily. So head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter even more. All competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK.
Steve, give us the winners.
Bogart99 wins a Denon AVR X2600H AV receiver worth £599. Well done to you, sir, or madam. And Norlis wins a copy of The Curse of Lelona. Is that how we pronounced it? Did we decide it was Sharona?
Yeah, let's go with that.
The Curse of Sharona on Blu-ray.
My Sharona.
There you go. That was
slick as boys.
We're winning at life. Right, so that's what we've been up to, and competitions. We'll be back in a sec with hardware. Okay, moving on to hardware, and we've actually got some stuff to talk about, some exciting stuff. Well, some of it's exciting. JVC Frame Adaptive Firmware Update. This has been coming for a while. It's why I haven't been progressing with my review of the NX9, because I've been waiting on this coming along, because it's going to change performance radically of the JVC projectors. Is that right, Steve?
It does. Yeah, this was obviously announced at IFA, wasn't it? Which was at the beginning of September. Quick bit of background, I guess. The N-series JVCs, when they launched at the beginning of this year, they had a feature called auto tone mapping. So basically what that did was it would read metadata on the disk and it would just adjust the setup of the projector accordingly, which when it worked was great. But 2 problems. One, quite a lot of discs it couldn't read, particularly Disney, Paramount and Fox. Which meant that either you had to manually adjust it, or if it looked okay, leave it as it was, but it wouldn't do it automatically. Or the problem was that because it's obviously the metadata for the entire film, and some bits are dark and some bits are bright, you might find that certain films maybe looked a bit too dark, or one scene would be bright or overly clipped, and another scene would be too dark. So it wasn't ideal. It was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't ideal. Initially, I picked up a Panasonic Blu-ray player, the UB9000, because that, along with some of the, I think the 450 and the 820, has an HDR optimizer, which kind of does a lot of the work for you, and that would work also with discs that hadn't necessarily got the metadata to read, because it would just basically default to 350 or 500 depending on how you set it up. Then they've announced this new feature. So the update went out on Wednesday. It's 3.1, firmware 3.1. And it adds a thing called Frame Adapt HDR. So now, when you go into the picture modes options, there's a new one called Frame Adapt HDR. Actually, interestingly, when you do the update, it automatically makes that the default HDR setting. You can go in and change that if you wanted to. In the menu system, you can select what you want to be the default HDR setting, but it does change it when it does the firmware update, so it's now the default, which is what you're going to want to use, believe me. So you select that as the picture mode, And then when you go into Frame Adapt HDR picture mode, you'll see there's a load of different options. And the first one is HDR level, and that's got 3 options: auto, low, medium, and high. Now, I've been leaving it at auto, and to be honest, it's worked fantastically as far as I'm concerned. If you felt the image was too dark or too bright, you could fiddle around with the low, medium, and high settings. But I've got to say, personally, I think the default auto setting is the best one to go with. And then also, if you go into there's an option called HDR processing, and there you have a choice of static, which basically means you're doing what you would be doing before the firmware update, where it was just reading the static metadata, or you can go for frame by frame or scene by scene processing. And the clue's in the name. That's basically what they do. It literally analyzes the image and adjusts the tone mapping on a frame by frame or scene by scene basis. And then one other thing, when you go into the picture mode for Frame Adapt HDR, you can select the lamp power. I find, frankly, that low works just fine. But if you want to use high, you can. Obviously, there's more noise associated with that. Then you've got the aperture. You can use manual or auto 1 or auto 2. But there's also a new thing where it says cinema filter, and you can select between normal or wide. So normal is basically without the filter in place. I guess this would not apply to the N5 because it hasn't got one. So this is only for the N7 and the NX9. But you can go between either select normal or wide. If you select wide, then obviously you're getting the full DCI P3 color space, which is what I'm using. So, but you can, some people prefer you sacrificing a bit of the color space for a bit more light output because obviously there's no filter in the way of the lens. So it's up to you. But I've used wide. Basically, I've set mine up with frame by frame, auto, and I've got it in low lamp mode, aperture, auto 2 with the iris wide open, and I've got the cinema filter at wide. And I have to say, it is awesome considering it's free. It's amazing. I think it's delivering the best projected images I have seen for HDR to date. I thought it was awesome.
Well, basically what it's doing is
play with it. You got to play with it.
I haven't had a chance to update it yet because obviously I'm going to come on to what I have been working on, and I'm still working on it tonight. I've still got videos to shoot and so on. I'll get round to it this week, and I'm excited to get round to it this week because I haven't watched a projected image for a while, and I'm starting to get withdrawal symptoms, so I will be trying it out. But basically what this is doing is it's basically advanced dynamic tone mapping for a projector. Yes. That's basically what it's doing.
Like the dynamic tone mapping on an LG OLED, or I think
Panasonic do it as well.
Panasonic. Yeah. A lot of manufacturers are doing it now, and this is JVC's version for their projector. And I think, I could be wrong here, but I don't think any other projector currently does this. I'm pretty sure the Sonys don't. So I think this is a bit of a feather in the cap of JVC, not only because they've got the feature, but also they've given it to everyone for nothing, which is very nice.
I think BenQ have got a version of this, Steve. So I wouldn't say nobody else has got it, but they don't do it quite as. No, they don't do it on a frame by frame basis, but they do have tone mapping on board.
Okay, but for my money, it makes the N7. Because you've got the N5, N7, and NX9. Obviously, an X9 is very expensive, and the N5 is good, but you don't get the wider color space. But the N7, I think in that price point, at the sort of $8.5 price point, where it's competing with the Sony, it makes it, a no-brainer in my opinion. It works really well. We're watching. First thing I put on the demo footage on Spears and Munsell first, because I've seen that so many times on so many different displays, and the fact I'd only just recently been watching it on a Philips OLED TV meant I had a really good idea of what it was supposed to look like. I'd watched it in HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and Dolby Vision. So I popped it onto the JVC, and it looked superb, absolutely superb. Then I put on Overlord. Now Overlord is a Paramount disc. There's no metadata to be read, or the disc it couldn't read it. So when I first watched this film on the N7, it had nothing to read, and the image was really dark, really, really dark. And I had to move the little slider control in the HDR settings to shift the tone mapping and make the image brighter, because otherwise it was unwatchable. You couldn't see what was going on. Watching it now with the frame by frame HDR tone mapping, dynamic tone mapping, looks fantastic. It looks the same as it does watching that movie on, say, an OLED TV or something like that, in terms of the way that the image, because it takes place mostly at night, so it's a lot of dark scenes, but they're meant to be lit. They're at night, but you have to see what's going on, and it looks so much better with this. It did work much better if I used. Previous to that, I'd used the HDR optimizer on the Panasonic, and again, that did a good job. But this does a fantastic job. So that looked much, much better. I watched some stuff from Passengers. It looked amazing. Aquaman looked incredible. Everything I've watched so far has looked stunning. and I'm really, really pleased with this update.
But obviously you have to caveat that with this is a projected image, it's a reflective image, it's not going to be as bright and colourful as a direct display.
Oh no, I mean, but as long as the tone mapping's done well, that shouldn't make any difference. And I think that the tone mapping's being done well, and this feature is really helping. And so in my room, which is admittedly is blacked out, the image, yes, it's not going to be anywhere near as bright as it would be on a TV, but for a projected image, I think it looks how it's supposed to look in terms of contrast and colours. So yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I mean, like I say, the fact that it's free is amazing. I mean, they could have.
It had to be free though, Steve. When you're given the price of the projectors, I think there would be a bit of an outrage if they hadn't done it that way around. Which it's good for JVC. I like the fact that they've improved the product.
Launched a new model and
said,
of course, it comes with this feature, which they have done in the past. So I think it's great. I mean, obviously the issue is that this series of projector. I mean, people have been saying, "Oh, is there going to be a new projector?" No.
This is your new projector. This is the firmware thing.
Enough for the ones they need to sell anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is it. But it's I mean, I've read some people online complaining and saying, look, the image was darker after the update. Well, that's not the case on my projector. Some people have said it's noisier, which it certainly isn't the case on my projector either. So I mean, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the update was easy. It works. It's all there, and I think the extra controls and features are really good. So.
Okay, good stuff. I will get round to testing it out next week because obviously I need to move on to reviewing the projector.
You should test it out first without the update, and then do the update and compare.
Yeah, I was planning on doing that. I've been doing a lot of comparison stuff recently, and once you start doing comparison stuff, it's like you can't stop yourself. So I've been lucky. I've been really lucky because the way things have happened is that I've had obviously we got the GZ2000 a little bit later than we were supposed to get it because it had some issues that they wanted to sort out before sending the sets out with the sound side of things. So that took a little bit of time, but to make up for that, they sent me out a GZ2000, but they also sent me a Sony BVM X300 mastering monitor. But obviously Panasonic have been using this TV and the mastering monitor to say how accurate their TVs are, especially the new line of Hollywood in Your Home, the GZ OLEDs. So the way that's worked out is I've had this master monitor in, and of course once I get a master monitor in to compare with the Panasonic, I'm going to compare it with everything else that's in here as well. Be silly not to. So yeah, I've ended up testing quite a few TVs next to this monitor. So I've got the LG C9. I've also got a Philips 854 which has gone next to it, and a Panasonic GZ950 as well as the GZ2000. So quite a few TVs to put up against this master monitor, and then obviously I've compared the TVs to each other as well. So as you can imagine, that's taken a lot of work. It's taken a lot of time because you want to wait to the evening as well. I can't black this room out completely during the day, so again I've had to wait on it getting dark. So I've been working a lot of evenings recently as well, just so I can completely black out this room and make sure I'm doing all my testing properly and so on. And it's been really interesting because when you read a lot of reviews online or in magazines and so on, if the reviewer mentions another TV, the likelihood is that they are not directly comparing the TVs, because not all the reviewers have the TVs in at the same time. So actually having TVs that you can actually compare and then write the review on, it kind of opens your eyes up to a few things, and it certainly opened my eyes up to the GZ950 versus the GZ2000. The 2000 is supposed to be or it is the flagship TV. The 55 inches, £3,299. The 65 inches, £4,299. So compared to every other OLED on the market, apart from the W series from LG, these are the most expensive consumer TVs on the market. They're sold as being Hollywood in the Home. They have an Atmos sound system on board with actual up-firing speakers. You can connect a subwoofer to the 2000 as well to up the audio side of things, and the panel has a custom panel where they have designed the heat dispersion on the back, and there's a lot of cooling areas on the back of the panel to cool the air. There is a way of getting heat to dissipate, and obviously heat is the enemy of an OLED panel. It can cause image retention, and when you're driving an OLED panel to get brighter, it's going to create more heat, which was perfectly illustrated by the master monitor, the X300, which has no sound system, no tuner, nothing but a OLED panel, an RGB OLED panel, and 3 massive fans on the back that are constantly on at high speed. It sounds like a really high-end gaming PC where the fans never switch off. They're just constantly on there droning away, which is Sony's way of cooling the panel down, so it can reach 1000 nits brightness, and obviously they're cooling it down with the fans. Obviously the Panasonic TV, the GZ2000, can't do that. You can't put the fans on because it would create too much noise, and so they've created the custom panel, and they've upped the brightness a little bit. Now, they were quoting 1000 nits, I think, in the literature. I think some review sites have measured it at 900 nits. I measured it 858, and that was completely calibrated properly to D65, which for an OLED is really quite bright when you compare to the other OLEDs like the Philips and the 950 and the C9 and so on.
Actually, the 984 is 850 as well.
Is it? Right. Yeah. So these other OLEDs, they're 700 and below. So there is a bit of a gap, 150 nits, 200 nits gap between them. But what surprised me was in side-by-side testing, you don't see it. There is a difference there. And with specular highlights, when you have the set side by side, you can see the slightly brighter specular highlights, Steve. But in terms of the image quality, again, you've got to remember, an HDR image, it's more or less the same as a normal image, but you're adding the specular highlights on. So if you think of it as a curve, the curve's a bit longer, up to about 100 nits. It's the same as how you would master an SDR signal. And then once it gets 100 nits, then it quickly gets brighter from there, if you think about this curve. And that makes perfect sense when you're looking at these OLED TVs side by side, the 950 and the 2000. They look incredibly similar next to each other, which you would have to, I suppose you have to accept that would be the case. That it's the same panel, although they've added the custom side of things to the back of the panel to dissipate the heat to get a little bit more brightness. But actually watching HDR content, the differences are not as big as I was expecting them to be. Now, when
when you think about it, Phil, I think you mentioned this in the previous podcast, that the human eye is not particularly good at differentiating
this is what I was coming on to.
Bright images.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was coming on to, and it was something that Don mentioned as well in our Spears and Mansell interview as well. You know, how there's more detail, there's more bit levels in the darker areas of the image than there is in the brighter. You've got more to play with, basically. So where you would probably expect, if you listen to the hype surrounding these TVs and the marketing that surrounds the TVs, you'd probably think that, the GZ2000 would be significantly brighter than every other OLED. That's not really the case. The specular highlights are brighter, but it's only in certain scenes within certain films. So if you were watching the GZ2000 in isolation, you probably wouldn't notice it. In fact, you wouldn't notice it. You'd only notice it if you had a 950 sitting next to it. Which raised a few things for me when it came to the GZ2000. Mostly in terms of value. This is an expensive TV, and I know they've put a lot of development work in. I spoke with engineers back in June. They told me quite a bit in a detailed briefing back in June about what they were doing, why they were doing it, why they wanted to boost the average brightness level, improve the contrast handling, dissipate the heat, cut down on the chances of image retention, add the Atmos sound system in. So they really have developed this TV. They've spent a lot of time on the TV. It's just when you put it next to the 950, some of the highlights are a bit harder to warrant when it comes to the cost, because I think the 950, you could pick that up for about $15.99 at the minute, $14.99 some places.
For 55 inch?
For the 55 inch?
Yeah, $14.99.
Yeah, so that compared to $32.99 for a 55 inch, geez, it's a big jump up in money. Now, the quality is there. The sound system, there was some issues with crackling, but with this latest firmware that's on there, it's 3.1 something or other. I can't remember off the top of my head. The crackling's gone. There's no issues with the sound system. The Atmos, it works if you've got a low enough, flat enough ceiling. It does bounce sounds. It's very front heavy, which you would expect. It's the same as a soundbar that would be designed to do that without the rear speakers. Add a subwoofer to it. It's a nice solution. But it's not a solution that everybody's going to want. And most people are going to be interested in this TV with a custom panel and so on. I would imagine, now, again, this is me generalising, but I'd imagine the vast majority of them are going to use an off-board sound system with that.
Are you limping towards the conclusion that there probably ought to be a monitor version of this panel, which would bring the price down?
Yes. And I think that I think if Panasonic
presumably there is a semi-professional solution where they do just sell the panel, don't they, rather than the...
I don't know, because I haven't had that confirmed officially, but...
I can't imagine that a production house would want all the other gubbins, would they?
Well, no. Well, this brings me on to the monitor thing, right? So we had the opportunity to sit next to this professional monitor. Again, there's a lot of hype going around with this, hype and marketing, Hollywood to the home. So let's deal with the marketing claims on this one. So does it equal or better the image quality seen on a £30,000 master monitor? No. Does it match the master monitor for image quality? With SDR, it looks very close in terms of the hues and tones, although you have to remember that this is a WRGB, the GZ2000, compared to an RGB. And we discussed last week with NanoSense, the purer the colours, the better the performance and so on. So the Sony wins it hands down for colour purity. It wins it hands down for HDR, because with HDR they don't look similar at all. The Sony is far brighter, it's a smaller screen, it can reach the 1000 nits, you really notice it in the highlights, you notice it in the specular highlights, like the Spears and Mansell footage. It looked absolutely astonishing with the different colours, like the frog on the branch and that kind of thing, and the highlights of the honey on the spoon and so on, with the light hitting it. It just looked far better.
I've seen those images so
many
times.
I could talk you through the whole sequence. Yeah, it doesn't match. It doesn't match it. But then if it did match a £35,000 master monitor, all the studios would be out buying Panasonic TVs. So it was never going to be the case that this consumer TV was ever going to match an RGB OLED 30-inch master monitor with fans on the back and they're pushing the panel to get absolute perfection, and it's going to be used like that day in, day out in a professional environment. That's where your 35 grand goes on that monitor. There's no way the consumer TV is ever going to do that. But they have taken the highlights of that monitor and applied it to the GZ2000. And if Panasonic are known for anything, it's how good their colour is, how natural their picture looks, and how accurate things are. And it does get accuracy out of the box. And all of the OLEDs I've tested from Panasonic this year, so the 1500, the 950 and the 2000, they all measure almost identical out of the box. If you look at the reviews, look at the charts, you'll see how similar they look in terms of, because the gamet's not quite right SDR wise when it comes to magenta, but all three of them do it that way. They've all got the same issue because they're obviously using the same lookup tables and so on. So yeah, accuracy out of the box, absolutely spot on. SDR looks stunning on the GZ2000, but it also looks incredible on the 950 and the 1500. Yeah. So yeah, I think what you're looking at is the 2000 is an all-in-one package where it does get a little bit brighter. There are some issues with that, which have been highlighted elsewhere and which I've seen as well during my long testing of this TV. So there is some posterization around bright objects. It's not a deal breaker
on the
at
GZ2000.
On the 2000, because it's pushing it a little bit.
Not on the 950.
No, not on the 950. The 950's far, and with the 2000, if you actually knock back the brightness a little bit on the panel luminance, it disappears. So it's obviously it's introduced by that. It has the autocal. Have you used Panasonic autocal yet, Steve? I imagine you have.
Actually, I haven't used this latest version.
Oh, yet. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Are you using the built-in test patterns? Or?
No. Obviously, I'm using my Meridio. I haven't used the built-in test patterns. But in terms of just connecting the meter up, connecting the TV, it's all done wirelessly, the Sony is through the app. Press a button and it does it. And it is so accurate. But then it's accurate out of the box. But
there wasn't much to do to get it. I mean, I think you only need to. I mean, when I had 950, I just literally tweaked the 2-point, a couple of notches. Yeah. And it was spot on. But if you did need to do more, it is very effective.
So I guess to wrap up, to cut through a lot of the hype and a lot of the build-up round about the TV, it's not going to match a master monitor. No TV at this price point is going to do that. SDR, they get very, very similar. With HDR, some of the hues and tones are very, very similar. The white balance is very, very similar. But, you're looking at a 30-inch RGB against a 55-inch WRGB. There are going to be differences in tonality of colours and so on. It's much purer on the Sony. It looks a lot brighter. The specular highlights are better, but that takes nothing away from the 2000. And like I say, the 2000, the 1500 and the 950, every one of them is out of the box accuracy is absolutely brilliant. Overall picture quality with HDR and other material, absolutely brilliant. What I did like was the uniformity of the 2000 was superb. Put a 5% window up and there's no issues whatsoever. Put 100% up, again, very, very clean, no dirty screen, anything like that to get in the way, and like I say, out of the box, really accurate. So is it worth the money? I guess that comes down to you as the end user. Certainly for myself, I could see myself buying one without the speakers and so on if they ever released a monitor version. In the meantime, if you put a gun to my head and said I had to go and buy a TV, because I don't own a TV at the minute, I'd probably go and buy a 950.
Yeah, me too.
I'd probably go and buy a 950, and that's just because that suits my implementation of things. And the jump of 200 nits, it's not really that noticeable, which I really did notice when it was side by side. It was like, okay, there is a difference, but it's not a huge difference. And they measure and the quality. So whichever one suits you, whichever one you go and buy, you're getting an absolutely cracking TV. And I would say the 950 is absolutely a best buy by miles at $14.99. It's for a 55-inch. Absolutely. Right, so like I say, other TVs coming. I've got a 854 Philips. You're looking at the 984. So that'll be up this week, the 984. I've also have, like I say, the 950, so there will be a review following that for the Panasonic 950. And the C9. So I've got the C9, which will wrap up my look at TVs at the moment. I think I've got a gaming TV coming in. Samsung, and that's about it for now. And then I'm going to start doing lots of the comparison videos and pushing all that content out. So there's lots of interesting stuff. I did a comparison with Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, which was an eye-opener, big eye-opener. Wasn't expecting the results I got, and I'm going to double check them before I make them public. But from what I've seen so far, there is quite a difference there. Which surprised me because I thought it'd be a lot closer than it was. And obviously what I've done is I've done it one way around with two sets and then swapped it around and repeated the tests the other way around. So, I've been fair to each format in terms of how they've been displayed and so on. So yeah, lots of content coming up. And the 2000 review, GZ2000 review, should be up this week with a very in-depth video if you haven't heard enough already. So anyway, lots of TV reviews coming up if you like that kind of thing. If you're into gaming, there seems to be quite a bit of information now coming in that Mark's going to tell us about with the PlayStation 5.
Yes. Well, it's official now. It is going to be called the PlayStation 5.
What a surprise.
I, for one, did not see that coming.
Now, is it the number 5 or is it V?
Oh, well, it's written down in Jim Ryan, Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO's blog post as a 5. But what's kind of got a lot of the headlines is the fact that there's this dev kit, leaks about it have been kind of doing the rounds. I'm never fully sure why, because the final retail model never looks like the dev kit. But in short, it looks very cool, and it kind of looks like a V from, top-down view. And alongside the blog post, there was also a Wired interview with Jim Ryan as well as Mark Cerny, Sony's lead architect. And basically, in short, the prototype dev kit renders that have been doing the rounds does look like what they were using. But although that's kind of taken some of the headlines, it's really nothing news. The kind of interesting tidbits are more around stuff like the controller. Obviously, with all kind of iterations of the DualShock controller, they add something. They have to do something. But they've got adaptive triggers this time, which does sound like it could be a bit of a game changer. The idea being that two separate actions, you can change the sensitivity on the trigger, a developer can, so that, drawing a bow will feel different to, the accelerator on a car, or, the accelerator and brake, for instance, will be different, will take different amounts of force to press. It's also going to have haptic feedback. And the chap doing the Wired interview noticed a small hole which is in the controller, which led to a lot of kind of speculation that Sony might have their own voice assistant for this console. Now, we've had voice commands before in consoles, traditionally with the camera peripherals, but it's generally been, take screenshot, launch game, that kind of thing, nothing particularly in depth. So, that could be a bit of a game changer. Other than that, I think in terms of hardware news, news that they're going to have ray tracing as hardware rather than software based. So, kind of more complex lighting models, shadows, that kind of thing. Solid state drive. So it's going to be a lot faster for loading things. But that does raise certain question marks about, the hard drive. Will it be smaller than people expect? And if, I think Digital Foundry questioned, if they put it on the main board of the console, so it's lightning fast, does that have potential ramifications for expandable memory? So you can't just plug in another hard drive into a USB port and expect it to run the game off of that as well if you need to expand. However, they have said there's going to be a greater ability to install and delete portions of a game, which is, would be quite interesting, because as installs become mandatory, if you've got a game that's got it's coming on a 100 gigabyte disk, if you've got something that's got a huge single player portion and you only want to play the multiplayer, or vice versa, the idea that you can kind of delete as you go, or just say, I don't want that on there at all, that could help mitigate some of the issues from that.
That sounds like a sensible approach. If it
sounds far too sensible to actually make it into the final product.
Probably.
Well, no, it's very much, rather than, we've always had this kind of thing where you'd split a game up onto two different discs, or just mandatory, you have to have everything. So it does seem smart, because when the PS4 first launched, there was this whole thing that you could put in a disc and you'd be playing practically straight away. The early titles, things like Killzone, the idea was that it would start loading and installing the chunks almost in sequence. So therefore you would be playing the first level while it's then loading up the second, and things like that. That kind of fell by the wayside at some point. And
once Rockstar hoved into view.
Yeah. But the size of games, I mean, you talk about Rockstar, Red Dead Redemption 2 on PC now is 150 gigabyte, so, but you also have to consider the fact that people are designing games around the fact that you've got these slower, older hard drives. So therefore, lots of assets are doubled and tripled up, because you don't want to have to continue having to go back through layers in the hard drive. So therefore, if you have something that's got almost instantaneous access to those assets, will those games come in significantly, kind of in smaller sizes, or will we see just at best no great inflation of the size? So, if 1 terabyte tends to be what people are kind of mooting at the moment, which seems reasonable enough.
That would be price manageable. I mean, even based on it going on sale imminently, which it's not, we've got another year, based on drive price progression, I don't see that being unachievable within the realms of the sort of launch price that we've come to expect from these consoles.
Yes, and I think ultimately it seems very much like Sony are continuing with what they've done with the PS4, which is don't make something too ridiculously powerful. Don't make something with ridiculous amounts of storage. In essence, do everything you can to maximize what you've got and hit, kind of around that 399 point. That is the sweet spot. I know some people are already kind of questioning, well, does it mean that it will be more expensive than that? And prepare yourself. Sony have generally been good kind of post PS3 to understand that 399 is that sweet spot now, and particularly when you consider the kind of inflation in costs and how much the old consoles would have cost in today's money, that it is a very good kind of prospect. Holiday 2020, so not a huge amount of time to wait. And beyond that, it's largely kind of news that was funneled off kind of around that dev kit leaked image, and we don't know a huge amount, but what we do know now, I think it sounds very much reassuring that what they're going with is almost like a continuation of the PS4. I'll be slightly disappointed if the talk of the revamped controller turns out to be what it has been thus far, which is DualShock 3 had analog buttons. Does anyone remember a game that used them? DualShock 4 had the touchpad. Again, kind of criminally underused. I do.
I only use that for blowing myself up, trying to throw a pissing grenade in Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yes,
That's literally the only thing I've ever used it for.
Well, the only thing developers tended to use it for in the end was one giant middle button. Just that's it, one giant pause button. So I do hope this idea of adaptive triggers and certainly haptic feedback, this idea that you can change difference between whether you're walking in sand or whether you're walking over gravel, just those small things could make a big difference. But all good news all round, and fingers crossed they managed to solve any problems with space limitation, because that's something that really you can't really head off. It's a little bit like with phone technology and trying to kind of get round screen sizes increasing and battery technology not coming on in huge leaps and bounds. It's something that all console manufacturers are going to have to butt up against at some point.
Mark, the big interesting thing for me, and obviously it'll be interesting for Steve as well, is the fact that they're going to use 100 gig discs. Now this means that it's also going to have a Ultra 4K Blu-ray drive, which means if Sony is up in the production of these, it's going to cut costs even more. If they're producing 100 gig discs, that's going to cut the costs of replication. They could actually, on the back of this console, save the Ultra HD 4K Blu-ray disc market as well with this.
Yeah. I mean, it was the big feature that kind of everybody felt was missing from the PlayStation 4 Pro. Again, ultimately, they made a price decision on that, and it was proven to be the right decision. But this definitely feels like it's the kind of thing that could kind of kickstart that market. I mean, it will be my first 4K Blu-ray player, so I'm sure there'll be many others in exactly the same situation.
If that's actually what it looks like, it is really hideously ugly, if you want my opinion.
It's
the one
a
thing
dev kit. They never look like that.
Yeah, I hope not, because that looks hideous. The thing that really surprised me is that there's rumours that Sony are also going to do a higher resolution version of the PSVR to go with it. Which I thought the PSVR had seen, part for me, no one seemed interested in it. So, but I would be delighted if there's an even better version of the PSVR.
They're doing it just for you, Steve.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sony. Thank you, Sony.
Well, no, that's the thing, is the fact that obviously you're going to have backwards compatibility, and it's going to should be compatible with PSVR and PSVR 2, which a lot of people are hoping might be wireless
and high resolution, obviously. Higher frame rate.
Well, the thing is, eye tracking technology is going to be the big thing there, because as soon as you get eye tracking technology, you can do foveated rendering, where essentially you only properly have to crisply render the thing that your eye is looking at. So all in peripheral vision can be blurry, muddy. Whereas right now we're basically having to render complete frames, so it's all nice and crisp, just in case you might be looking from one side to the other, which is it's a huge drain on resources. Whereas if you could just take 1/3 of the screen and focus on that, how much that would free up in kind of development power. It very much sounds like it's future proof, but PSVR was always going to be dipping their toes in the water to try and see is there an appetite for it? Can they make it happen? And can they bring it in at a reasonable price point? I think they did that. And
again, a lot of people have been saying that the console is a dying breed and it's going to die out. Yet that doesn't seem to be the case at this moment in time.
No. I mean, ultimately, the architecture does become more and more like kind of specialized little mini PCs, but ultimately they've always been built on the idea that you've got a set standard of architecture around which developers can work. They can kind of maximize the benefits towards the latter stages of their lifespan, and that you put a disc in, it'll work. There's kind of no great breakup of the user base, anything like that. I don't think there's going to be any death of the console too soon. The big thing looming on the horizon, though, is Google Stadia, and whether we see perhaps in the next generation both Sony and Microsoft push more towards their own streaming services, cloud gaming, that kind of thing. yeah, you wouldn't be shocked to see things moving in that direction. But I still think there's space for a dedicated box under the TV.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Mark. PlayStation 5, it looks interesting. We'll see what happens with that further down the line. I'm sure we'll come back to it. And I'm sure we'll come back to that in future podcasts. Anyway, it's film time next. So, Steve, I booked my tickets for 3D HFR of Gemini Man, which you're going to talk about. I didn't get there.
I thought you had to pay extra for it.
I did, yeah. I had to pay. I paid the £3 extra. I wasn't happy with that. Just the principle. It wasn't me being a tight Scotsman. It was the principle of you got a limitless card. Yet you can only go and see
basic, including the £3 extra.
Yeah.
How much was the ticket though, including £3 extra?
£9.75.
All right. In Bath, it was £14.25p. I mean, if you weren't using Limitless card, obviously there was £3 extra for Limitless. But my mate went with me, and he had to pay £14.25p. That is ridiculous.
It is. But anyway, I was
rip you off in Bath.
I was feeling a bit queasy, and I just thought I'm not going to sit in the cinema with high frame rate because I feel like throwing up now just sitting here. I'm not going to. So I didn't go. I ended up not going because I just thought.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah, I just thought there's no way I could sit through that. A, the film, and B, HFR. If I'd been feeling all right, I would have gone and done it just out of interest to see what it was like. But so, what was it like?
So the film was shot. So this Ang Lee directed it, and he's obviously been very keen on this pushing the technological envelope, I guess is the word you're thinking. But this film was shot in 4K 3D, so native 3D, but at 4K, which is not normally the case. And at an HDR and also at 120 frames a second. Now, I don't know anywhere, maybe a couple of places
Dolby
in the States. Yeah, Dolby are showing it 4K, 120 frames a second, HDR, 3D, but pretty much nowhere else. So if you go and see it in 3D in this country and in the States, it's basically 2K 3D, but at 60 frames a second. So slightly different from The Hobbit, which was 48 frames. But the experience was not dissimilar. Basically, I'll tell you how. I suppose I'll talk about two things. One is the film, and the other is the technology. So the film is a so-so action movie. To be honest, if it had been shot normally at 24 frames a second, I think I'd have enjoyed it a lot more as an action film because there were some quite good action scenes in there. There was a really good bike chase. And some nice single take. I guess because he was shooting with 3D rigs, he couldn't do a lot of cutting, so he tended to do long takes in the fight scenes, which was nice to see rather than cut. And the plot's fairly, it's not nothing special. I think the de-aging technology that they used to create a young version of Will Smith really worked. There was only one scene where it was a scene that took place in broad daylight. Where the edges showed a little bit, but most of the time they shoot it in shadows or darkness, or they make it less obvious, and that worked a lot better. But the de-aging was fair. I mean, there were times when I forgot it was Will Smith talking to Will Smith.
It was de-aging though, was it? It was an entirely CG rendered model.
Well, there was a body. They had someone physically there, didn't they?
They did, and they superimposed a CG model on it. But it's unlike, for example, The Irishman, where they've taken De Niro and they've de-aged him. Instead, they've created an entirely CG young. Yeah,
there were a couple of scenes where they had sort of like a character running around, and it was clearly CG. Most of the time, it worked, but it didn't look quite right. But I wasn't quite sure whether it didn't look quite right because of the frame rate than because of technology. So it was hard to tell sometimes. But there were definitely moments where you thought, like, yeah, that looks like young Will Smith. Although, as we pointed out previously, old Will Smith looks pretty good anyway. So,
if you were going to try and do this as a test basis, it's not the same as trying to do it to Mickey Rourke. Let's put it like that. He has aged gracefully. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you could have taken it the whole hog and decided to use Rob Lowe and just not bothered. But no, nevertheless, he still fundamentally looks recognisably similar to how he did in The Fresh Prince. It's been a very graceful process for him.
So it's a passable actioner, but the high frame rate, honestly, I mean, first of all, because of the high frame rate, they have to flood the set with light. So it looks like a wedding video half the time. It's just there's no artistic lighting going on here. There's nothing that you would call cinematic. It looks like a glossy, expensive TV show in the worst sense of the word. So not like a expensive Game of Thrones TV show, which looks cinematic. It just looks like a game show almost, the way it's there's so much light on the set. There's nothing artistic about the look of it. And also because of the high frame rate, you basically feel like you're standing there watching them rehearse, and you're actually there on set. And that's not the same, and this is the same thing it was worse with The Hobbit, because obviously they were trying to create a fantasy world. At least this was taking place in the real world ish. If you're documentary or sport, high frame rate's amazing because you're trying to show the real world. A film isn't the real world. A film is an art form. Film is not meant to look like the real world. That's the whole bloody point. So all the artistry is gone. There's nothing, there's no lovely compositions. There's no beautiful lighting. It's nothing. That's all gone, and it's just overly smooth. And you just feel like you're standing on set watching them rehearse. And that's not you don't feel engaged in the film. Also, and I don't, maybe this is Ang Lee's directing style, but people kept looking directly at the camera when they were talking in a scene, like one shot and a reverse, and that felt distracting too. And I think what it does is most of the performances, to be fair, are good in the film, but if you've got a bad actor, they really look bad. There's nowhere to hide.
It was the case with The Hobbit, though, that that whole opening section where they were all singing round the table and that it felt like a stage play because of and I watched that again in 24 frames, and it was a completely different experience.
Yeah.
It's one of these things. Now, somebody has mentioned recently that maybe the approach to this is to do a variable frame rate. So when you have
24p for 24p, say, a dialogue
and then
sequence,
action sequence,
ramp it up for an action sequence. Yeah. You could do that, but I mean, I can tell if something is anything other than 24p.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I can tell instantly.
Yeah,
and it just takes me out straight away. It's not a film anymore, and I know it makes me maybe. I mean, the thing is that for whatever reason, it was obviously at the time 100 years ago, nearly. They when they brought in sound, they needed a frame rate that was fast enough to have synchronized sound, but also slow enough to not use up loads and loads of film.
Yeah, and that's still the case.
24 frames a second was what they chose. Yeah. And that is the look of film now. It's been that for 100 years nearly, and it's what film looks like. Whether you like it or not, that's what film looks like. You use any other frame rate, it no longer looks like film. But the thing that makes the difference is not just the frame rate, it was the way everything was lit. Because of the higher frame rate and the shutter speed and the shutter angle, they have to flood the set with light. Everything was so overlit that it just didn't look in any way film-like. Even without the frame rate, it would have looked awful. There was nothing about it. When you see a film, it's a single. Obviously, I mean, they were shooting with stereo rigs as well, which doesn't help, and a lot of it was single take rather than say a single camera setup. But what makes a film different from a TV series normally, and there are exceptions these days, but a lot of TV series, they use multiple camera setups, right? They'll shoot something from two different angles at the same time. So you have to light the set very flat so you can just shoot simultaneously. Whereas a single camera setup, which is how most films are shot, because you're shooting from a single direction from the camera, single point of view, you can artistically light that set. With shadows and depth of field, whatever you want to make it look. There's none of that in this film. It was. I mean, I never want to see anything like that.
And again, I want to make the point. It's not just old guys complaining, because that's
the cinematographer.
Yeah, the whole industry is, apart from the odd person like Ang Lee, like James Cameron, and Peter Jackson, the rest of the industry and the people behind it, the technical side of it, and all the rest of it, and the studios. They prefer 24 frames per second because of all the things that you've just said, Steve. And it's not a case of old guys just not embracing change. It's the fact that it doesn't work. And I think it's been proven that it doesn't work.
I saw a couple of photographs, still images of the film, and I thought, oh, that looks nice. Completely different, because it was a photograph of a scene from the film. It looked completely different, and I just know if it had been shot normally, the way most films are made at 24p and lit more artistically, it would have been a completely different. I would undoubtedly have enjoyed the film more, because it's an okay thriller, and there were some things I liked about it quite a lot, but the whole HFR experience just destroyed it, really.
Yeah.
So I could understand all of this if this had been his first time out of the gate. But he did Billy Lynn.
And everyone hated it.
And Jackson did the first Hobbit movie.
No, all three Hobbit movies have done it high frame rate, but
it was just nobody showed them.
Very rarely
first one.
shown that way.
After that, no one wanted that.
Yeah, so what I don't understand is why did he double down and go, well, obviously
because he's trying to force change through.
I'll do 120. Yeah, but I could understand if it was his first time, but no one likes this. This doesn't make any sense. The only thing I've heard is that it's better for 3D action scenes.
Well, basically, yeah, when you've got fast movement, because you've got 120 frames or 60 frames in the way I was seeing it, the motion, there's no motion blur, which obviously makes it easier to see what's going on in an action scene, particularly with 3D. But the lack of motion blur means it doesn't look. It looks like
unreal.
Playing devil's advocate for a moment, is it possible to take this to an extreme? There's a point where you hit the refresh rate of our own ocular system, and then it clicks. My only parallels to this is that there's been some experiments. There's lots and lots of vastly contradictory information about high-resolution digital audio, and certain people saying it's pointless to go beyond certain thresholds. Other people saying if we hit certain thresholds, to put it in a sense,
it's not like having headroom though, which is what you're talking about there. It's like having that extra headroom, which adds more to the frequencies that you can hear. No, this is completely different, and the reason it is different, and again, it's not old men saying, "Oh, we don't like change" and all the rest of it. It's been around for 100 odd years. It's shot at 24 frames. It's actually projected at 48, but it's shot at 24 frames a second with a certain shutter angle on the camera, which gives it that film look, and that's what we've been accustomed to as film, and that's how the stories are told. And when you change it from that to a higher frame rate, it just doesn't. It's not like having extra headroom or anything else. It's just it takes away from that style. Now it could be that, given another 20 years, it takes off because the generations that are coming through now are used to gaming and other video that is at 60 frames or higher, and they get used to that look, and it could be that's when film changes. But at the moment, I think it's so disruptive.
For me, it was particularly noticeable because I did a double bill that night. I saw Joker, then I saw Gemini Man, and Joker looks lovely. It's got a lovely gritty 80s look about it. I know it was shot digitally, but they've made it look like it was shot in the 1980s, and it looks fantastic. And so going from that, where you got a very deliberate attempt to create an artistic film-like look to the film, that for a specific time period. So and the film's set in the early 80s, and they wanted to shoot it like it was shot in the early 80s. Going from that to Gemini Man was particularly noticeable because one looked amazing, lovely to me, and even though the film itself is gritty and not necessarily, as you pointed out last week, Phil, not necessarily something you want to watch twice or enjoy, I loved the look of it. Absolutely loved the look of it. And so Gemini Man was the opposite, whereas the film was possible entertainment, but I hated the look of it so much that I couldn't really enjoy it.
Yeah, and somebody needs to win an Oscar for that Joker. It looks absolutely sublime.
What's an interesting film? I'm not sure. I don't think it's something I'd want to watch. Whereas to say The Dark Knight, I've watched loads and loads of times, and I love Heath Ledger in that, and I love the film. Yes, Joaquin Phoenix is amazing, but I'm not sure it's the sort of film you want to watch.
No, which is what I tried to get across last week.
But it was
as a work of art,
watching a film that was so different from the average comic book, movie. So that was nice, and it's done really well. It's made like 500 million so far.
Yeah, I'm glad you
off the 50 million budget.
I'm glad you went to see it.
I suppose the other thing that's weird though is if you are a committed advocate of using high frame rate, it just strikes me as weird that there are, it doesn't necessarily allow for the same creative license, but as you pointed out right at the beginning, there are arenas of cinematography and capturing things which are wholly. 2 CESs ago, I saw that 120 frame per second American football sequence.
Oh, I am all for sports.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
All
for it.
It's incredible. Sitting under a pile of rocks, trying to take a photo, trying to take a video sequence of some incredibly rare and shy creature is not the same as Will Smith blowing stuff up. But come on, if you are Adam, that's where you can change the world, because it looks it looks real. I mean,
well, that's the point. That's why it suits documentary. That's why it suits sports and so on, because there is a need for it, and it fits that need, and it makes the experience better. It just doesn't do that with film. It's just incompatible with film. And drama storytelling. Yeah. Okay, I think it's time to move it on. So Gemini Man as a film, you were going to score it?
I'd probably give it 6 out of 10 as a piece of entertainment, as an action movie. But
Joker?
Go and see it. Oh, I give that 9.
Okay, good stuff. Excellent. Right, let's move on. Films opening this week, Kaz.
Yeah, we got Zombieland Double Tap. The whole crew are back to, I think is it a decade later? How long has it been?
Yeah, it's a decade, yeah.
Yeah, so 10 years later.
Has a decade passed in the film?
Yeah, I think so.
So that looks interesting. I mean, the trailer looks very funny. So a bit of an unexpected sequel there. And we've got, well, probably also slightly a bit of an unexpected sequel is Angelina Jolie back from Maleficent 2. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and bringing Michelle Pfeiffer along this time.
Was a good thing in my book.
Oh, God, you. We can't take you.
Zombieland. I went looking for my Blu-ray version. I can't find it because I want to watch it. Yeah.
Watch it tonight after this podcast.
Yeah, I want to watch it, but I couldn't find my copy, so I might have to go and try and find it on a streaming service somewhere.
Or you can pick up the 4K disc now.
Oh yes, it's on 4K disc, isn't it?
Is it?
All right, okay. I didn't want to spend all that money.
No.
Right, okay, so that's films opening this week. Then, disc-wise, what can we get, Kaz?
You can get the very first Hellboy, the 2004 one. Well, I mean, a lot of people prefer
that's right. Hellboy 2 is really good as well.
So they like those first two. But anyway, you can get the original Hellboy. No idea why it's been released out of order, but
because I'll tell you why. It was supposed to come out ages ago, but Del Toro said, "Well, we're going to do a 4K release. Let me do some new stuff for it." So he's done loads of new features. That's why.
Well, that's.
So it's very nice of him. So it's both versions of the film, director's cut and theatrical version, plus loads of new commentary. There's a 2.5-hour making of documentary, tons of stuff. It's good.
I'm looking forward to that.
Is that just a real-time video of them painting Ron Perlman red? Sticking some horns on him. Off you go.
Sorry, in my head, when you said painting Ron Perlman red, I just thought, does that make him Ron Burgundy? But yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely.
He's Ron Burgundy.
Quite a nice little play on words there for 2020.
I wonder if Mark's taking note now that the PS5 is going to have a 4K Blu-ray player. You taking note, Mark, on these disc releases?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a no.
No, genuinely, when it came up a little while ago that in the running order about Angel Heart, I thought, right, it's about time for me to jump in. Because
you did say that when there was a talk about Angel Heart coming out. You did say, well, maybe I'll come on 4K now.
And Kaz, is it worth getting?
Well, which brings us to Angel Heart. That's the other one out. It's tremendous. Yes, everyone should have this.
Mine arrives tomorrow, hopefully.
This is how to take an old movie shot on film and upgrade it with Dolby Vision. So it looks fantastic. They've really, really done a tremendous job. And I'm very happy. I would not have put this in the first, 1,000 4K releases. It's an unexpected and very nice release. So that's already out, already reviewed, reviews up. Everyone's fighting over the fact that it's still got cockfighting censored. Okay, but it's still a great release.
Okay,
it's got the cockfighting censored.
Yeah, it's still illegal in this country to show animals being
genuine animal cruelty.
Yeah. So it'll never, it's become a big argument about what the BBS.
Oh, right.
But
that's fair enough. I've got no issue with that. Same with things like horse trips. I mean, they're just cruel. It shouldn't be allowed.
It's like 4 seconds. 4 seconds has been removed.
As long as we still get to see Lisa Bonet's knockers.
I knew you were going to say that.
Steve is extraordinarily predictable. No, Mark, actually, whilst I remember, sorry, just very quickly, Phil. Mark, have you watched Sound and Fury on Netflix?
No, I haven't. Not yet.
I suspect, in terms of your past mentioned love of some of the more peculiar samurai ends of anime sort of stuff, you might want to give that a whirl. At least parts of it, anyway.
I've added it to my list.
Yeah, it's still very
But
weird.
It's only 45 minutes for you to be saying, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then next time you come back on the podcast, we can make it like 5 times we talked about sound and theory on the podcast.
Yeah, actually, Ed, why do you keep bringing it up? Are you on a commission here or something?
No, I'm not. But my vinyl copy will turn up presently. I've gone for the ridiculous one from America, but no, I've actually the Netflix stuff I can take or leave. It's one of my albums of the year. I mean, it's just gloriously bizarre in terms of what it is, but I love it. So there.
Okay.
And on Blu-ray we have DC's Titans Season 1, which I should get the discs for soon, but we've already seen, well, a lot of people have seen it on Netflix, and it's a nice, gritty DC entry. In fact, I would say that looking at it, DC are doing quite well with going down the serious route. A lot better than they are with what looks
the lightness of touch. They
Yeah,
have no lightness of touch.
So if you look at Joker, it's a great job, and DC Titans is how they should do a Titan series. So that's coming out Blu-ray. Also, Eureka's releasing Dogs of War and The Dark Half. So if we don't have enough Stephen King in our lives, there's more.
Just to be clear, with Dogs of War,
that's the one with Christopher Walken.
Yeah, it's a good film, but for the love of all things, if you're going to go in for that, I'm sure it won't cost you anything to find a copy of the Frederick Forsyth novel in a charity shop, because it's just magnificent. As far as I'm concerned, it's a better Forsyth novel than Day of the Jackal. It's just peerless from start to finish. And
I saw Dogs of War at the cinema when it came out, and it was a double A. I went with my dad to see it, and I was actually 13 at the time, and it was double A, and you had to be over 14. And we got to the cinema ticket counter, and the woman said to my dad, "Is he over 14?" And my dad said, "No." I went, "Oh, Dad!" And he went, "Oh, yeah, no, sorry, he's just turned 14." And she went, "Yeah, whatever." And we went.
That's the same story for me, and the first Batman movie is the first 12 rating. And my uncle thought it would be a good idea.
You didn't have to be over 12, though. You just had to be accompanied by an adult.
No, I'm sorry. 12A is a later development.
Yeah.
12.
Oh, was it? You had to be over 12.
You had to be over 12. So I turned up, and
I was like 25.
I was almost 12. I was a few days off, and my uncle went, "We're celebrating his birthday like a couple of days early. You can let him in?" And they went, "No." And I said to him, "Next time we lie," and we had to drive around and find another cinema. and he just went, "Yeah, he's 12." He seemed to think he could persuade them that it's okay, it's his birthday, to let him in. Well, why not just say I'm 12 then? But yeah. Anyway, yes, Dogs of War, Dark Half coming out, and one of my gems of the year is American Woman, which no one's going to watch, no one's going to have seen, but features what I think is an Oscar nomination worthy performance from Sienna Miller, who people might not remember from anything other than Layer Cake and
American Sniper.
So I would say until American Sniper. So for 15 years, she hadn't done much of note, but she was almost unrecognizable in American Sniper, and really good, to the point where you went, "Hang on, is that Sienna Miller?" And she was really good as the wife. I think she's tremendous in this. Really underrated film. Go completely under the radar, but well worth it. On streaming, we got Purge Season 2 from Amazon. I couldn't get through the first season, so I'm not looking forward to this one. The Laundromat, which is Steven Soderbergh's latest. He's enjoying his run of cheapish movies on Netflix, and this one's got all-star cast: Gary Oldman, Meryl Streep, Antonio Banderas.
Is it about a laundromat?
It's about a company doing a company.
I've seen the
and then an old lady who takes them down.
Yeah.
So you also got Living with Yourself, which is Paul Rudd's doing a Van Damme.
I sort of quite liked the look of this, except that the trailer gave so much away.
Yeah, I stopped.
Unfortunately I forgot to do that because I've got problems with my brain. But no, it's sort of, I think I've already seen most of it. So yeah, but nevertheless, I like Paul Rudd very much. But,
the ageless Paul Rudd.
well, absolutely, yeah. He's another person that you could probably cheap out on the anti-aging effects. It's like we've
sellotape and some dye, and you're good to go, aren't you? Really.
And last is Wounds, which is Netflix horror. Netflix seem to do quite well when it comes to horror. It's
not with that tall grass thing. It doesn't.
Oh yeah, I know. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to say Netflix does well on anything anymore because I'm so tired of watching movies that have a great idea.
At least this weekend you managed to watch you had something to watch that was actually good.
Yes. Okay.
El Camino. It's well worth it.
Yes, it was, but it feels a little bit like that was a buy-in rather than a commission. So it doesn't...
Oh no, I don't think so. I think it was it was a Sony production, but I mean, because it was, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, it had all the marks. They looked amazing.
It did look amazing.
It looked absolutely stunning.
They did well with that. I mean, I like a lot of their stuff, but I just don't like the way it ends. So I watched Fractured.
Yeah, I like Fractured. I bet that's all set up and no payoff, isn't it?
Yes, I really enjoyed Fractured. It's proper Netflix Shutter Island. Netflix the game. It's a really good setup. Very mysterious. Sam Worthington's quite good in it, surprisingly. But come about maybe half an hour from the end, it's just not gonna be a good ending. Like, it's not gonna make any sense. It's not gonna work for the journey you've been on, and it's gonna be a massive anticlimax. And Netflix are just so good at that.
Lo and behold.
Yeah,
it's like In the Shadow of the Moon. You can see the endings for that coming about half an hour before. In fact, I realised what the ending was going to be.
You feel like Netflix gets all the movies that the studios would have sent before an audience. The audience would have gone, no. They'd have reshot the ending, and then they'd have released it.
Yeah.
And they get all the movies that don't get that end bit. So we are lumped with the endings that we're just sitting there going, no, we didn't want this.
It was quite sad watching El Camino because on the same day that it was released,
yes,
Robert Forster, who's in it, died.
Yes.
It was his last film. That was a bittersweet moment, but it was a nice sort of end to Breaking Bad, I suppose, because I guess Breaking Bad's about Walter White, and if you wonder what happened to Jesse Pinkman, this ties up some loose ends.
And Forster's had a great career, but it's a very nice role to end on. Like, if it's his last role. I mean, it was a standout performance. Yeah. Really nice character in it. So, I mean, it adds a little bit of tragedy, obviously, but it's nice that that's what he went out with.
Well, there you go. That's unusually wholesome for us. I hope this podcast isn't what I'm going out with.
Can be arranged.
Well, stay away from sharp objects and, some of the more lurid chemicals and stuff that you've been using for pest control, Mark, and I'm sure that you'll be around for another one.
To be honest, my neighbours lent me a kind of industrial heat gun, which I'm going to have a go at the door with. Yeah, genuinely, the light that it refracts back on you, it's like Mark Strong's character in Sunshine. And I have no idea if it's got lead paint in it.
Is this the worst superhero origin story ever that we're listening to right now?
But in somewhat related news, I have found out that I've got smoke alarms that work.
Oh, good. Well, that's something. Well, I'm heartened by that, Mark. That's good. Have you got a carbon monoxide alarm?
I don't know yet. I'm feeling a bit sleepy, though.
Can I note? Actually, do you know what? For the most part, I don't take anything seriously, but carbon monoxide alarms are not expensive. And they are something that genuinely could save your life one day. So if you don't have a carbon monoxide alarm, they are about £20. Just get them sorted.
They're cheap as hell and they're all over Amazon. There's no excuse not to have one.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Because it really, in terms of its ability to make a situation go from perfectly ordinary to perfectly horrifying, not a lot gets close to carbon monoxide. So yeah, there you go. Right, let's talk. Yeah,
bringing it back to the tone of the podcast. What are the dimensions of the hole in your garden, Mark?
It's 7'5", and then I went down about 3 foot.
You're not quite there yet.
So it's a good fire hole. If nothing else, you could probably if you came under attack, you could defend the garden from there. If you had some form of weaponry.
I'm completely lost. I don't know what the hell we're talking about now.
Well, Mark, remember at the start of the podcast,
joined in with the listeners.
Right, to wrap up, Zombieland is back, and it's been a decade since the first movie. So, are there any other small-scale movies from the 80s, 90s, noughties that we would like to see an unexpected sequel of? And let's go to Mark first.
I would like to see a sequel to Dread. It just... I like...
They're doing a TV series now, aren't they, apparently?
Yeah, they are, yes.
Yeah, I know, but it just... There's something that I think they could have done a sequence of films. Yeah. It's very much in the kind of John Wick mold of kind of lowish budget, heavily stylized, very much set based, minimal on location shooting, anything like that. Just dark action thriller, and just it doesn't have to have a big arc. It doesn't have to be this kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe type thing. If you're doing comic book fare, sometimes it can just be just one shots, that's it. And with a character like Dredd, kind of dispensing justice. Via ultra violence, you just think, well that's fine. Don't analyze it too much. All they had to do was just kind of give us another story. That was it. It doesn't have to hold up. I just thought it was perfectly placed to get us to turn into a reasonable little series.
Didn't it founder in part, in terms of immediate reruns, on the fact that Carl Urban is actually a very busy gentleman? I think he's done a lot of stuff.
I thought it was entirely to do with the formatting. So it completely flopped because of 3D, and then no one wanted to get a sequel over because you couldn't really see it if you didn't see it in 3D. It was an odd choice in marketing. They didn't make it very easy for people to see it in 2D, and so I think it didn't make enough money. And so talk of a sequel was nah.
But it's built enough of a following now, though. And, via streaming services and via, disc sales, I thought it did pretty well. I thought there was some question mark over kind of franchise rights and things like that or something at one point. That it seems like one of those projects that's kind of likely to, you're going to hear it get kicked around for, kind of another 10 years or something like that. And then it just doesn't get made.
You've got to be careful, otherwise Stallone will try and do a sequel to his one. I mean, that seems to be his line of business.
I'd like to see that.
But did you ever hear what the original plan for Rambo 5 was going to be be, though?
Yeah, it was going to be sfi.
Yeah, it was going to be some
an alien.
Rambo in space?
No, it was a mutant kind of beast type thing, from a government research facility. Yeah.
It's going to be Predator, yeah.
Yeah, basically. But I had a quick butcher's online just to see what kind of things, to try and jog my memory, what kind of films could do with sequels. And I don't think I've ever been quite so depressed by online opinion before. Just some of the things that people back, like the Shawshank Redemption.
What? He's back in prison.
Yeah, Red's back. Yeah, he's
There are some interesting ones that they've put up there.
Twins goes quite high as well.
I would also say that a lot of them have already had sequels, and that hasn't turned out particularly well. But one of the highest I'd have for sequels is that will never happen, but they really should have done the series, is Master and Commander. I'd have loved to have seen more from that universe. But amongst the sequels that you see online that they're talking about is like Heat, a sequel to Heat, a sequel to Leon.
I think there was a sequel to Heat. He's dead.
Well, they were talking about a prequel sequel, so
yeah, because of course the actors are in perfect condition for.
De-aging.
We could do it because they're all still alive. All the main actors still alive. I would quite like to see a sequel to Midnight Run. I know there were 2 TV movie sequels that didn't involve De Niro or Grodin or anybody like that.
Midnight Zimmer frames now.
Yeah, De Niro's still. I've got to say, Charles Grodin's getting on a bit, but De Niro's still moving around. So. Well, he's playing a younger version of himself in The Irishman.
Yeah, if they can get this de-aging right, I think it'll make it interesting to see what happens to.
I think it's a dangerous technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think in the past you would just apparently in The Irishman for most of the film they're de-aged because like. De Pacino and De Niro and Joe Pesci are well in their 70s, but they're generally playing people in their sort of 30s, 40s, and 50s. You would, in the past, you would just hired younger actors, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading the Will Gompert's BBC review of it today.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about.
just about the fact that yes, you can de-age their faces, but you've still got the body of a septuagenarian.
It's like
the John Wayne Green Beret effect.
Yeah.
So, as they move
Yeah,
around.
I mean, you've got to figure that
Captain Marvel could hardly run, could he? He was hobbling along.
Who's got the Shatner corset these days?
The corset.
I'd also like to see a sequel to Tron Legacy. I actually am one of the few people that really enjoyed that, and it was a really
it's beautiful
audio-visual
and
experience.
If Daft Punk had another opportunity to write let's face it, one of the best film scores of all time, I'd be all up for that. I don't really care what happens in the film as long as they get to do another one of those.
So I'd like to get not so much a sequel, but actually a remake in memory of Robert Forster. But I'd love to see someone. They were going to do it at one point, but it's gone a bit quiet. I'd like to see a remake of The Black Hole.
I won't join you in being particularly excited about that, Steve. Sorry.
Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Remake films that weren't particularly much cop the first time round.
I thought we were talking about sequels rather than remakes. I mean, well, I don't know.
The sequel really worked because they come back out of the black hole, I suppose.
Spoiler. Go on. Can't have any spoilers.
It's a spoiler that they go into the black hole in a film called The Black Hole.
You know what comments we had last week about spoilers.
Yeah, this is true.
Listen, if you don't know what happens in The Black Hole, which came out in 1980?
Yeah.
So
I didn't know they go in the black hole. I'm just saying. Just saying.
It's called The Black Hole.
I thought it was a euphemism.
And for those who didn't know, Rosebud's a sled.
Okay, well that's good. Can I throw one in there because I actually watched it a couple of days ago, and it's the reason it doesn't have a sequel is just generally because of what the cast has gone off to do. But I thoroughly enjoyed the film The Losers from a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
I really, really enjoyed that. And obviously, Chris Evans went off to become a mega star, but he has now reached the end of that arc.
They'll never do a sequel.
I know.
Just Elba in that. Well,
yeah. It's based on a two-part story, two-part graphic novel.
Comic book,
yeah, and it's quite important because the first one sets up what happens in the second one, and at the end of the first, it is not a complete cliffhanger, but it is a shift up to what goes on next.
I would have loved to
didn't make any money, and
no.
And they hadn't yet hit stardom, so there was a window where they could have gone, let's make a sequel. It wouldn't have cost that much. It had, it had some fun tracks in there, and it's quite stylish. I really enjoyed it. But I'm one of those The Losers apologists, probably like I'm a Tron Legacy apologist.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed The Losers. I thought it was a great film. And another film, which I also watched comparatively recently, which is not time dependent because it can be done chronologically at any further point in the character's life, is Hannah. I know Amazon's been messing about
TV
with it.
series.
Yeah, that's it. That's it for movies about Hannah. Amazon's done it.
Yeah, I can never pronounce the poor lady's name, but she was she was astonishing in that. And essentially, you talk about there are justifiable complaints about the lack of strong female leads and so on and so forth. I mean, there was all the basis for a more, if you like, a more stylized twist on a female Jason Bourne. With that, and they never. Obviously, don't get me wrong. She seems to be plenty busy, and she does lots and lots of quite highbrow things. But I love that film. Again, in part helped by the fact that Chemical Brothers score very underrated.
Yeah,
very very underrated piece of music. It's so clever because actually, if you just sit down, unlike the Daft Punk Tron Legacy one, if you sit down and listen to it on its own, it's like, well, this is weird. It doesn't work. Whereas in the film, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It is really good.
Really good.
There was a whole period where it became about artists who weren't renowned for their scores.
Yeah.
Doing tracks. So you had Daft Punk do Tron Legacy. You had Chemical Brothers do Hannah. You had M83 do Oblivion.
But equally, I would say that with Oblivion and Tron Legacy, that was a jackpot thing. Those scores are absolutely outstanding. Some of the very best the last 20 years.
But it hasn't become a trend. So it's interesting that we had this little flash where They were some tremendous scores.
Well,
I mean,
these days,
who was the chap
just
from,
Hans Zimmer does everything. Many of us going brrr a lot on keyboards.
The Radiohead guitarist who did There Will Be Blood.
Johnny Greenwood.
Yes, that was very good as well.
Yes, the score to There Will Be Blood was really good.
And obviously Tom York did the Suspiria one.
Although it's better than
good listen.
Better than back in the day, because I'm reviewing Red Heat on 4K Dolby Vision, and I'm listening to I can't even remember the the composer's name. The guy who did the score for all those movies in the day. He did Clear and Present Danger, he did Patriot Games, he did Red Heat, he did Aliens, and he used
James Horner.
He did the same score for all of them, and it wasn't even his.
Well,
he isn't
going to do any more now because he's very dead.
Well, I know. I appreciate that. And
I can usually spot a James Horner score in about 5 minutes.
Because it's the same piece of music he's using.
Yeah, he does use it quite a lot.
Yeah,
I'm watching Red Heat, and I'm like thinking, is this Red Heat?
To be fair, though, they all do that. You can listen to John Williams' score, and yes, the main theme will be different, but the rest of it's all basically a riff on the same stuff.
Yes, you can tell that John Williams. You can tell the Bond in that. But in this, it's actually the same score.
Well, you see, what you could do is you could interchange the James Horner scores for Braveheart and Titanic. You could turn them around.
Can do that, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I've long maintained that the Emmerdale score is exactly the same as the $6 Million Man.
That's
just
quite
slightly
niche,
slowed down.
And on that bombshell.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap up. I
think it's time to run.
Yeah,
to yourself.
Yeah, okay. Right, so that's it for this week. I need my running order so I get my wording right. My thanks to Ed Selley.
You got shot in the leg. Your dick probably don't even work.
Steve Withers.
Yo, man, we ain't the Cosbys.
Kaz Harlow.
My wife knows I ain't no bitch.
And Mark Botwright.
What am I smelling?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and videos, plus why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos on the latest product launches and reviews, and feel free to subscribe while you're there. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.